home. Now, the Prime Minister could be facing a rebellion over the government's plans to cut winter fuel payments, with reports that as many as 50 Labour MPs could refuse to back the policy.
Yes, even his own Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, he admitted he's not remotely happy about having to take money away from pensioners, but insisted it is a necessary move.
Well, MPs have their chance to vote on the plans to scrap winter fuel payments universally for pensioners tomorrow.
Well, let's head to Westminster and speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Now, Christopher, last time I was on this seat, there were no plans for a vote. In fact, I thought the government had vetoed such a vote. How did that come to pass?
I think the government here is looking to try and find a way to allow MPs to let off steam and understand that there are some tough choices to be made in government. But there's no question the government is facing the most difficult day tomorrow of its short 2 months so far in office. Tonight, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, meets with the Parliamentary Labour Party, with many Labour MPs upset by this withdrawal of this fuel benefit for so many millions of pensioners, of some of them who are their voters. And then at 7 p.m, Alison McGovern, who is the Pensions Minister, I can reveal, has called a mass meeting of Labour Party members to explain why they're doing it. And that comes ahead of a vote tomorrow. We're expecting the result around 2 p.m, when, as you say, as many as 50 Labour MPs could not support the government. And then what does the government do? Does Keir Starmer suspend the whip from those who have opposed the government or gone absent without leave? A difficult day, and that starts tomorrow for Sir Keir Starmer with the TUC conference, when two very big unions have already said you must go back and do a U-turn on this measure, which will save maybe £1.6 billion, which barely touches the side of the £22 billion alleged black hole that the government says is there. So a difficult time for the Prime Minister, and they're facing it head on. We're told from the Cabinet meeting this morning that there was no attempt to say we're going to water down this change. No one spoke out against it. It seems that all the Cabinet are in favour of a measure which will leave many, many pensioners colder this winter.
Now, Chris, you and I were in the room the last time Keir Starmer spoke at that conference venue in Brighton. That was back in, I think it was 2021, when he was the fresh leader of the Labour Party and was trying to push through all sorts of controversial constitutional reform to his party. He was heckled and heckled and heckled. A speech that should have taken an hour took almost 2 hours because of all of the people standing up and shouting at him. Might he have a similar sort of reception from these trade unionists who seem pretty angry about these winter fuel cuts?
Tom, you're right, they might well do. I mean, 2021 is a lifetime ago in politics. Back then, Sir Keir Starmer, there was talk of a leadership challenge from Angela Rayner. Would she have to be sacked or leave the government, or leave the front bench team? A different time altogether. I mean, 3 years later, he is king of all he surveys. But I think people wonder why on earth this government has taken this choice to remove this benefit from so many pensioners. It wasn't mentioned in their manifesto. It's not a manifesto breach, but it is one that has made a clear choice between increasing pay for public sector workers who can work and can get pay rises or even leave their jobs and get a second job, whereas pensioners are stuck on fixed incomes. And that's why it's so politically toxic, I think, for this government. But of course, we heard from Rachel Reeves at the end of July. She made very clear they need to do this to pay down this large black hole in the public finances they say they've found.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor there in Westminster. Very interesting that not one Cabinet Minister spoke out about this policy, considering it was not in the manifesto. Perhaps they knew it was coming. But in the Conservative days, Cabinet Ministers would speak out quite frequently, would they not?
But also, it's interesting listening to what Rachel Reeves was saying as recently as June or July 2024, saying that the Conservatives should not break commitments on winter fuel payments. Indeed, in 2017, the Labour Party calculated 3,850 pensioners would die if winter fuel payments were means tested. Well, did they not believe it when they said it then? Or are they simply being callous if they're being consistent?
I guess they just say things change. Things change. Joining us now is politics editor of the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. This is very tricky for Keir Starmer. Yes, he has his cabinet on side, none of them speaking out today in cabinet. But this is playing very badly with the public.
It is, and it's playing very badly with Labour backbenchers as well. As you mentioned earlier, up to 50 could potentially rebel either by voting against the government tomorrow or by abstaining, finding something better to do than tripping through the voting lobbies tomorrow afternoon. Now, this is causing severe discomfort, as I say, on the Labour backbenches. I think that is being transmitted to the Treasury. But as Chris Hope was just saying there, thus far anyway, both number 10 and number 11 are sticking to the line. There will be no U-turns, there will be no tweaking of this controversial policy. There'll be no sweeteners, short of basically the campaign they launched last week to try and get uptake of pension credit increased, because if you are on an income threshold that allows you to claim pension credit, then you will keep your winter fuel payment. But that still means 10 million pensioners who received their winter fuel payment last year won't receive it this year, and obviously they're very unhappy about it.
It is, of course, a pretty extraordinary political fight to pick in early days of a government. Of course, we know that the Grey vote is perhaps the most powerful interest group in the United Kingdom. Through all the years of austerity where cuts were made to services for anyone under the age of 65, of course, pensions grew by their fastest rate in history. Free bus passes were maintained, free television licences, all the rest. It was austerity for those in work, but not for those retired. Might we be seeing an inverse of that relationship now taking place?
Absolutely. I mean, during the election campaign, both main parties went out of their way to reassure pensioners that the triple lock on pensions will be maintained throughout this Parliament. Now, Labour have said they're sticking to that, but there was certainly no mention during the election campaign of winter fuel payments being taken away. Now, remember, winter fuel payments were actually introduced by a Labour government under Gordon Brown many years ago, so this is a really big deal. And lots of Labour, not just backbenchers, but people in government are scratching their heads as to why Rachel Reeves has decided to pick this particular fight so early in this government's tenure. When you look at what it saves, something like £1.5 billion, really, it's chicken feed, really, when you look at the overall size of the government's budget. And it's, as you say, they're a powerful lobby group, pensioners. They do tend to vote come election time, so they have it in their gift to really punish Labour when they next go to the country, either at the next general election or the upcoming local elections, because there will be many local elections, obviously, between now and then.
Yes, OK. Well, thank you very much indeed. Kevin Schofield, politics editor of the HuffPost UK. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I'm sure quite a lot of people on the pensions will get in touch and say what you said was outrageous, Tom.
What, there wasn't austerity for older people? Well, I think that...
They use public services, do they not?
They do, but whilst there were pay freezes for people in work, pensions did rise in the last 14 years by the fastest rate they've ever risen, thanks to the triple lock. That was introduced.
You should be grateful.
Well, I just think it's a fact that the amount spent on pensioners rose while the amount being spent in other areas of the economy fell.
Yes, but when you say that, people will point to the state pension elsewhere in the world and look to the continent and say it's far more generous, and that actually, very difficult for someone to live purely off the state pension.
Yes.
These days.
Yes, that's...
Frankly, impossible, depending on where you live.
Depending on where you live and whether you own your house outright or not. And
have other income.
Lots of different factors. But saying these levels start... I mean, it used to be the case that there was a huge degree of pensioner poverty, that pensioner poverty was the biggest blight in society. Now pensioners as a group have less poverty than those in work, proportionally.
Sad state of affairs, really. But John's got in touch. He says, I bet anything that Rachel Reeves finds the money to pay pensioners, and that will be her rabbit out of the hat come the budget. What, do you think this is all some kind of game? That actually they will find the money magically and then everyone will love them again.
Terrifying people for a game. I doubt it, to be honest. I think the U-turn would be humiliating.
That's very cynical from John.